the Americans came to the eastern province with the Aramco company, they had to live in a compound area. Inside, they have their own condition, situation like in the United States. Outside, they have to live with the Saudis as the tradition exists.
They started building these camps. It was new to us. Air conditioning was new to us. All these things. And then, what was good about Aramco is they shared it. They used to get canned food. We've never seen canned food at the time. And we used to fight over who takes the empty cans, because these are toys for us as kids. So we were always glad to see the Americans come in, and especially the chewing gum. And the chewing gum was a big contributing factor of liking. I remember the first time when we had a refrigerator that was supplied by Aramco to a number of people. My father was one of them. We as kids were sitting there, must be 16 hours, to see how ice is going to be formulated within this refrigerator. Of course, it took 16 hours because every time we opened the refrigerator, it loses its freezing impact. So we were absolutely, it was magic when we saw a cube of ice. We didn't really know the world of technology. We just thought it was different, and it is America.
The Saudis were interested in one thing, and that is that their oil industry was preserved and being handled in a way where they could negotiate and they could increase the oil prices and so on. And they had extremely good relations with Aramco.
All right, let's break down that documentary clip. The Arabian American Oil Company, A-R-A-M-C-O, Aramco. Its birth we can consider in 1933 with the Standard Oil of California's purchase of the concession in the eastern province to mine for oil that no one was sure actually existed in Saudi Arabia, not until 1938, when its presence was actually confirmed, and confirmed in vast quantities even to this day. Saudi Arabia maintains the world's largest oil reserves, and more oil has been pumped out of Saudi Arabia than any other place on the planet. Once oil was found, the other major oil companies quickly moved in to take advantage of the situation. By 1948, Saudi Arabian oil was controlled by 4 major oil companies, the big 4 that still exist in some form to this day. They are Standard Oil of California, the original purchaser of the concession, the original exploring company that found the oil in the first place. They eventually became known as Chevron. The Texas Oil Company also had a stake in the Aramco adventure. Texas Oil Company, today known as Texaco. Standard Oil of New Jersey, believe it or not, is actually Exxon, and Socony Vacuum is today's Mobil. Of course, Mobil no longer exists as an independent company. Exxon purchased them some years ago, so it's Exxon Mobil. Texaco and Chevron still maintain their independence. So from 1933 straight through to 1948, you have Saudi oil being pumped out by American companies, with the Saudis themselves, in the form of the Saudi royal family, the House of Saud, reaping some profits, but compared to the profits being reaped by Exxon, Texaco, Chevron, Mobil, it was a pittance. The world in which these major oil companies operated in Saudi Arabia is a pretty remarkable place. In a very real sense, the oil companies had recreated for their employees in Saudi Arabia a replacement America. What we're going to see now is a fascinating bit of primary source evidence. It was produced by the Standard Oil Company of California, eventually became Chevron, in 1948, to highlight what they had done in Saudi Arabia and what they intended to do in the future. This is just a couple of years after World War II, 1948. Let's take a look.
On May 29, 1933, after weeks of discussions, there was a meeting at Qasem Palace on the outskirts of Jeddah. It was there that Saudi Arab government officials representing His Majesty signed a concession covering roughly 320,000 square miles. This was the starting point of a new American business venture abroad. But ahead, there was a long, long distance to travel, a huge investment, years of effort, and no end of patience and perseverance. Most important of all, the job would require men, hardy men, determined men who were willing to leave families and friends and journey halfway around the world on a quest that might end in failure. Men who could face hardship and monotony and still take it. Men like Paul Strong. Paul Strong had never heard of Saudi Arabia when he was asked back in 1938 if he would like to go there. That answer was easy for him. He would not like to go. For his money, give him the peace and quiet and comfort of the small American town where he'd lived since he finished college just a few years before. The company sought out other men. Sought them where men are always found when the chance of pioneering is offered, across the breadth and depth of America, on farms, in small towns, in great cities, and each man had his own problems to weigh, each his own decision to make, for they were being asked to make a life career of oil in Arabia. They weighed and decided, and gradually they began to arrive. Carpenters, machinists, riggers, technicians, drillers, executives too, eager to extend a welcoming handclasp to the new arrivals. And who is that over there? Why, sure enough, Paul Strong. Paul had forgotten back in the States that he had that traditional American characteristic, a hunger for adventure and challenge. He and the others had come to learn of the Middle East, and they found the going was tough. Few outsiders had ever before been beyond the treaty port of Jeddah, and the Arabs were suspicious of these strange newcomers. Many of them were frankly hostile and were quite ready to show their feelings. Even the extended hand of friendship was accepted grudgingly in the early days. On top of all this, it was hot. 120 in the shade on many a day in summer, sometimes soaring to 140 in the sun, and with high humidity to make it even worse. There were flies and dysentery, and the housing was makeshift. There was little to do except work, and life seemed rugged indeed. Here in such a setting, they prepared to search for oil. A long road has been traveled since those early years. There have been changes and great expansions. The original concession has been enlarged and now embraces an area of 440,000 square miles, equal to the states of California and Texas combined.